This video is brought to you by True Tales of Buried Treasure, the largest collection of old treasure magazines in the West. We're pleased to announce that we are now selling our physical magazines directly on our website. You can browse by magazine title or search for a particular issue using the search bar. To pay us a visit, please click the link in the description. Enjoy. Kansas, land of waving grass, red earth, and wide skies. But beneath those windswept plains, the soil holds more than just roots and stone. It holds secrets, some old, some deadly, and some still waiting to be dug up. In this episode, we'll be riding alongside three of the most tantalizing treasure legends ever to come out of the Sunflower State. Tales soaked in blood, ambition, and gold that never made it home. First, we'll visit the shadowy corners of Galena, where a hard-faced woman known as Ma Staffleback once ruled with a grip of iron and left behind a whispered hoard that's never been found. Then we'll follow the ruts of the old Santa Fe Trail, where a doomed caravan and a Mexican freighter named Martinez vanished in a blaze of violence and left silver dollars scattered in the dust. And finally, we'll circle back to the banks of Cow Creek, near Lyons, where a chilling robbery in 1843 left a U.S. Army payroll missing and a man named DePrefontaine buried under a cloud of suspicion. That gold and silver still hasn't come to light and might just be waiting for the right hands to find it. These are not just campfire yarns. They're stitched into the rough fabric of frontier history, recorded in weathered journals and passed down in half-remembered whispers. So settle in and keep your spade handy, because you're about to hear three true tales of Kansas treasure still lost. There was a time before the 20th century rolled in when a 15-foot board fence stood guard like a silent sentinel over a grim huddle of stone buildings just outside the main walls of the state penitentiary in Lansing, Kansas. That fence wasn't put up for decoration. It kept watch over the women's prison, a place as dreary and joyless as a prairie winter. The women folk locked away in that stony hive lived like shadows. Their cells, built from native stone, had slits for windows that barely let in enough air to keep a candle alive, let alone a soul. From first light to dusk, the women bent their backs over boiling tubs and scalding suds, their hands raw from lye soap and endless toil. A newspaper man who did time there in 1887 said it plain: "For these inmates, the week consists of one continual round of labor," and no one doubted him. In the year 1897, a woman from Galena, Kansas, joined that cheerless little colony. Her name was Staffleback, Ma Staffleback, and she wasn't some pickpocket or chicken thief. She was locked up for a mess of killings. Some said a dozen, some said more. Her victims were mostly well-heeled lead miners, mine owners, and silver-tongued investors who came to Galena chasing fortune and never left. They were drawn in like moths to flame, and Ma, well, she was the fire. During her trial, Ma clamped her jaws tight. She didn't say a word about the treasure, just clammed up like a snapping turtle. But everyone knew she and her three sons had taken rich pickings off their victims, and the hoard was never found. The courts might have taken her freedom, but she took the secret with her. Now, Kansas prison officials weren't fools. They figured time would wear her down. That stone house of sorrow was hotter than a branding iron in summer and colder than the devil's handshake in winter. So they waited. "She'll talk," they said. They all do. But Ma wasn't like the rest. She held fast for 25 years, until March of 1909, when word came down like a hammer strike. Ma Staffleback is dead. And she hadn't spilled a single word about that treasure. Warden Haskell muttered what many already figured: she took her secrets to hell with her. Since then, many a treasure hunter has come sniffing around Galena, hoping to dig up a gold coin or a fancy ring. But all they've turned up are old bones, the poor fellas Ma and her boys tossed away like broken tools. Now, I don't deal in fairy tales, and I won't tell you Ma didn't stash away a mighty fortune. She surely did. That woman got rich the crooked way, starting in the booming days of Galena when lead was flowing like spring water, and miners walked around with silver in their pockets and whiskey on their breath. It was a time when even a poor plowman could turn over a rock and find himself a vein of wealth. Folks said you could yank a weed from the dirt and find ore glinting beneath it. Men who came west with nothing but calluses and dreams were millionaires by sundown, and in that fevered rush for riches, Ma saw her opening. She didn't stake a claim like the others. No, she opened a boarding house, only it wasn't just meals and beds she was offering. She brought in a few hard-faced, sharp-eyed women who knew how to smile just right and talk a man into staying the night. But Ma wasn't content with coins on the pillow, she wanted it all. So she borrowed a page from the Bloody Benders, a clan of killers who ran an inn not too far away, and made a habit of murdering travelers and taking their gold. Ma added a twist: get the miners drunk, tempt them with promises, and then have one of her sons sneak up behind with an axe and settle things for good. Once the killing was done, they hauled the bodies off in wagons and dropped them down into old mine shafts, wet, deep, and forgotten by all but the ghosts. Ma kept her books neat and her manner modest. She'd haggle over pennies at the grocer's and grumble, "Lands o' Goshens, I don't know where the money goes." All the while, bodies kept disappearing, but no one thought twice. Men came and went in mining towns, fortunes rose and fell like prairie storms. Then Ma's luck ran thin. One of her girls got mad, maybe over a cut of the profits, maybe over a man, and went to the law. Soon enough, Ma and her boys were in shackles. They searched that house from cellar to rafters, but found little more than trinkets. The treasure was gone, vanished like mist at dawn. Since that day, folks have scoured the old shafts, draining water, poking into the dark, hoping for the gleam of gold. They found bones, sure enough, but never Ma's stash. Now here's where I'll offer you a bit of cowboy common sense. Ma Staffleback wasn't a fool. She planned for trouble. You really think she'd dump her gold down a shaft she couldn't reach in a hurry? Not likely. My bet is she buried it in plain earth under a bluff near a tree beside a boulder that looked like any other, something she could get to in a flash, if she had to run. If you're hunting that loot, don't waste your time with soggy holes in the ground. Grab yourself a metal detector and start walking those fields. Somewhere out there in the red dirt of Kansas, Ma's treasure still waits. And if you find it, well, just mind who's watching. Ma may be long gone, but a secret that dark might still have teeth. They say the plains around Dodge City, Kansas, flat and wind-scoured as a griddle, hold more than buffalo grass and ghost stories. Somewhere out there, not far from the Point of Rocks, lies a cache of Spanish silver hidden deep in the dust of the old Santa Fe Trail. Now, the Santa Fe Trail was no ordinary wagon road. It stretched like a taut rawhide strap from the Missouri River, clear down to the sunburnt adobe walls of Santa Fe, New Mexico. In 1853, long before Dodge became the byword of the buffalo trade and cowtown lawlessness, a freight caravan set out from New Mexico, heading east for Independence, Missouri. This train had rolled north from Old Mexico and was captained by an old trail hand named Joseph M. Martinez, a man seasoned by sun, saddle, and hard luck. The wagons rumbled as far as a little rise of land west of what would one day be Dodge. There, with their oxen tired and fires kindled low, the Mexican freighters made their last camp. It was late evening when the watchers caught sight of movement on the plains. The camp stiffened like a snake sensing a footfall. By dawn, fear had shape. Comanche warriors came down on them like a prairie fire. For 5 days, the two sides clawed at each other across the flatland. Ammunition grew scarce, and water scarcer. When the final charge came, it left the freighters butchered and broken, all but Martinez. Somehow the old man survived, maybe knocked cold and passed over for dead, maybe just too tough to kill. When he rose from the dust, sun-maddened and staggering, he found the camp torn to shreds. The warriors had taken what they wanted, torched the wagons, and vanished into the plains. Martinez remembered something the Comanches had overlooked: 21 bags, each packed tight with silver Spanish dollars, hidden in one of the wagons. 1,000 coins to the sack. With no one left to share it and no hope of carrying it, Martinez did what men have always done with riches they couldn't keep. He buried it. Somewhere near the Point of Rocks, a spot that once marked the edge of Mexico itself, he scratched out a grave for his treasure. Then he did the impossible. He made it back to Mexico. But the desert and grief had taken their toll. On his deathbed, He whispered the tale to his son, painting in the air the spot where silver lay sleeping beneath Kansas clay. That son later rode north with companions, hearts full of hope and saddlebags full of sharpened iron rods. They found the old camp, bones bleached and memories long scattered. But the treasure eluded them, as it has everyone since. By the time Dodge City grew up around buffalo hides and barroom shootouts, folks already whispered about the buried silver. In 1877, someone posted a warning in the Dodge City Times, telling would-be diggers to stay off the Morris Collar farm near Point of Rocks. That was 24 years after the massacre, but curiosity dies slow on the prairie. Robert M. Wright, one of Dodge's old buffalo men, swore in print that the hoard still lay near Point of Rocks. And maybe it does. Modern folk with gadgets and metal detectors have an edge on the sharpened rods of old. But silver that slept under prairie grass this long doesn't give itself up easy. And as every plainsman knows, sometimes the chase is the real treasure. Of all the old tales buried in the prairie dust of Kansas, none carries quite the same weight of gold and blood as the story of Joseph DePrefontaine, a name that, on paper, bore no more menace than a man selling lace in St. Louis. Yet behind that French-sounding name lay a trail of smoke and gunpowder, ending in one of the most baffling lost treasures to ever vanish beneath the buffalo grass near Lyons. DePrefontaine was a man of contradictions. The early records, what little remains, paint him as a family man, even respectable. In a year's time, the shopkeepers of Missouri tallied up his purchases: a pair of men's shoes, a pair for a woman, boots, and no fewer than 6 pairs of children's shoes. But shoes don't always tell the road a man's heart is traveling. He came to St. Louis in the 1830s, just a pup in his 20s, fresh-faced and itching for a piece of fortune. He found work at a theater, a fancy place with red velvet chairs and cultured folk quoting Shakespeare. But the playhouse had a saloon, and that was the true stage where DePrefontaine performed. Culture didn't hold a candle to whiskey and wild talk. One night during a highbrow performance of Hamlet, DePrefontaine, full to the gills with liquor, mounted a saloon table and bellowed out his own version of the Prince of Denmark's woes, mixed with jokes about St. Louis manners. The drunks roared with laughter. The theater folks did not. A posse of cigar-chomping gentlemen dragged him out by the collar and promised that next time they'd trade words for bullets. That was the end of DePrefontaine Street, Louis chapter. Out west he went, to Westport, Missouri, where the Santa Fe Trail began. Here the air smelled of oxen's sweat, wood smoke, and the promise of gold. He holed up at Yoakum's Tavern, where news flowed as fast as whiskey. It wasn't long before he caught wind of something big: a Mexican caravan rolling out of Santa Fe with $12,000 in gold and silver, and not a guard in sight. Its owner was none other than Don Antonio Jose Chavez, a man whose name carried weight clear back to when Santa Fe was ruled by governors, with powdered wigs and family honor. Chavez set out with 5 servants and 55 mules, bound for Westport. But he couldn't outpace the frost. A cruel Kansas spring knifed into the caravan. Mules dropped, frostbitten fingers froze around rifle barrels, and wagons got abandoned. Still, Chavez pressed on. Word of this rich but ragged caravan reached DePrefontaine in the smoky dark of Yoakum's Tavern. He wasn't alone at the table. A pair of Texas ne'er-do-wells, Jack and David McDaniel, had their own ideas about how best to liberate that gold. They passed themselves off as captains with orders to raid Mexican trains. More likely, they were outlaws with the scent of silver in their nostrils. By midnight, they had a gang of 15 rough men ready to ride. They caught up with Chavez on Cow Creek, a lonely stream west of what would one day be Lyons. The Mexican trader had made camp, thinking the worst was behind him. When he saw horsemen on the rise, he even told his men to cook extra food for the visitors. DePrefontaine and the McDaniels rode in smiling. Then they drew pistols. What followed was part robbery, part butchery. The first haul, around $35,000 in coins, was found quickly. 7 of the bandits, spooked by the possibility of cavalry hot on their heels, vanished into the prairie with their take. Most believe they buried it along Cow Creek in haste, hoping to return. But the gold fever wasn't cured. The rest of the gang stayed behind, convinced there was more. For 2 days, they hounded Chavez, turning over wagon planks and trunks. Eventually, they found another stash. What they did next ended any chance of mercy. 4 of the men dragged Chavez away from camp and gunned him down. Then they dumped his body into a ravine and rolled his wagon in after him. Some say there was still more gold in that wagon, still there when it was buried under grass and thyme. Before long, soldiers caught up with the gang. 10 were arrested, including DePrefontaine and the McDaniels. The brothers swung from the gallows. DePrefontaine, by some miracle or well-placed bribe, wriggled out of the noose with a presidential pardon. The rest went to prison. Of the treasure, little was ever recovered. Maybe the gold is still out there, buried near Cow Creek under centuries of mud, root, and prairie hush. Trouble is, most treasure hunters, lured by confusing tales and second-hand maps, spent decades poking around the Arkansas and Little Arkansas rivers. They might as well have been digging in the moon. But the old-timers who followed the trail, and the records that slipped through the cracks of history, all whisper the same name: Cow Creek. If a man were to find that gold today, it'd be worth more than dollars and cents. It'd be a piece of living history, a hard-earned relic of greed, cold blood, and the kind of Wild West tale that doesn't end with justice but with silence. And somewhere in some forgotten cemetery, the bones of Joseph R. DePrefontaine might still be rattling in protest.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to read the original article or purchase the magazine from which it was taken, please check out our website, truetalesofburiedtreasure.com.